So I've been kind of just sitting back observing the meta, observing how things have unfolded since update 3.2.1. And if you start asking the question if 120 round per minute hand cannons are still good, you get a range of answers. You get one side still saying that yes, they're absolutely meta, they haven't changed at all. And then you got another side that says they're garbage. I think if there's one thing that this update really changed, outside of course changing the actual damage numbers and the range of the weapons, as well as more steep damage fall off, outside of that, what it really emphasized is that the god roll for your 120 is imperative now. Not that it wasn't before, but if you think back before like the first nerf to 120 round per minute hand cannons, it didn't really matter. Your roll could be subpar and you would still be effective with that 120. Now in today's sandbox, guys, we're going to be narrowing down how 120s are feeling. We're going to be talking about the 120s that have really stood out to us, which rolls you should be going for, as this has changed greatly from sandbox to sandbox, especially with the hand cannons like Igneous hammer. So real quick, let's just talk about the patch note. Again, they reduced the precision damage multiplier from 1.8 to 1.6. It used to do 90 damage per crit. Now it's doing 80 damage per crit. This allows for Guardians to survive the 2-tap against perks like Rampage, multi-kill clip. Now, obviously, multiple stacks of multi-kill clip could get the 2-tap. Kill clip itself can also get the 2-tap. And empowering rifts can still get the 2-tap, except on Guardians 6 resilience or more. And the other day when we actually broke down everything with the sandbox, what has changed, what we really narrowed down to, if you want to survive more, whether it's from a shotgun blast, 2-tap and 120s, aggressive sniper rifles, sitting in empowering rifts, you want to rock 6 resilience or more. It's important, and that's pretty much the magic number here. With that being said, arguably the biggest differences is of course the range. And from the top end, we used to actually sit somewhere around 48 to 49 meters of range. Now that dropped drastically in the previous sandbox, and then they dropped it even more in this sandbox. Point of references though, Loud Lullaby, which kind of has like a mid-tier range level, can only reach about 36 meters at the most. Igneous hammer, which has very, very high range, especially if you have the right roll, used to touch 39 and even knock on 39.5 meters. Now it's hitting at 37. And even my god roll True Prophecy here, which has been one of my best hand cannons in my arsenal for the longest time with rangefinder, has now dropped to 39 meters. Regardless, it's still very good range. Even the godliest roll Palindrome with rangefinder, range perks, everything helping it in the range department, still barely reaches 37 meters. So two things I want to emphasize when we start breaking down 120s today. Number one, when you start entering that 35 to 36 meter territory, 140s will mess you up, man. Ace of Spades, Palindrome. I've even seen Thorn make a return. And obviously the map has a lot to do with this. Take Trials Report right here. You'll notice that the meta for this weekend on Javelin has 140s and no 120s, which is crazy. But that drop in damage is steering people away, because previously you only had to land 1 crit to body in order to get a kill with a 120. Now you got to land 2 crits in a body, and that may not be a good enough trade-off for most players, especially for players that already have a well-rolled 140. Again though, the map really does play a big difference. Now 120s, to be honest with you guys, the hand cannons that really don't feel all that different to me, outside of course is the damage. This just made me change lanes in terms of what I consider to be the god roll, but I still find that my Igneous hammer here with snapshot killing win is still one of my better rolled hand cannons. It feels fluid with snapshot. I'd already moved to snapshot because quick draw got a nerf. Remember, that used to be the god roll in Igneous hammer, quick draw and rampage. However, I've completely exited from that roll and I've just been using this Igneous hammer right here, and it still feels fantastic. Stat wise, it's got everything you want. 69 aim assists, a hell of a lot of range, and of course killing win is a fantastic perk for 120s. You're already trying to put yourself outside of reach of other weapon types. Having that increase in range increases that target acquisition even past the point of damage fall off, which as we've seen here from the patch notes, damage fall off is steeper, meaning you lose stickiness once you start getting outside that 37 to 38 meter territory. Overall, I'm still very impressed with Igneous. You just have to be a little more disciplined on where you place yourself in gunfights. There was many times that I found myself in that 35 meter territory and I would suddenly get shredded by a palindrome. But if you do back up and you do keep your distance, Igneous will still mess up a lot of enemies. It still does 80 damage per crit. That's a lot of damage for literally just peeking. And that's the thing, 120s have kind of fallen back into what it was originally designed for. It wasn't designed for you to just stand out in the middle of the open and square up with everything. It doesn't have the time to kill value to do that. It's 1 second, guys. You have to peek. You have to dip in and out of cover. You have to be at range. Now 120s that go beyond that that range, there's actually two of them, is of course Bottom Dollar and True Prophecy. Now, Bottom Dollar, for the longest time, you really didn't need Rangefinder. These are its random roles right here. You have Rangefinder, you've got Surplus on this list. You also have things like Opening Shot, Rampage, which is really not worth it. But arguably the best perk now in that final column is Explosive Payload. And the same thing here with True Prophecy. True Prophecy, which I don't even know if it's even dropping anymore. It should be, but I haven't seen one in a very long time, actually has the ability to roll with both Time Payload and Explosive Payload. Look, they're pretty much the exact same thing. The only difference is Explosive Payload does detonate immediately, as in there are moments that I would actually shoot an opponent, and that delay between Time Payload actually exploding would result in me trading with my opponent. So is Explosive Payload better there? Perhaps, but Time Payload does offer a stagger approach when you're dueling with opponents, meaning you would shoot the opponent and then the payload perk would explode in between your shots. I actually felt like this kind of like doubled up when it came to flinching enemies, because it was like they were getting hit twice. Like instead of my weapon being perceived as a 120 round per minute hand cannon, it was being perceived as a 240, and that can mess up a lot of enemies. But again, the downside is occasionally you will go for the trade. And my role right here is a Rangefinder Time Payload role, which I very much like. We're talking 39, close to 40 meters. And again, the beautiful thing about payload perks is no damage fall off. That's right. You could be on the other side of the map, and if your hand cannon shot is good, that explosive perk will still proc full damage. It's not a lot, but it's enough to get a piece on that enemy. And in team shot scenarios, especially in game modes like Trials, that's important. Honestly, going back and forth between Bottom Dollar here on Les's account and my True Prophecy, I think they are both arguably the best 120s in the game for what it is you're trying to achieve with them. And that is to get outside of 140 territory, to still be able to use a hand cannon at great ranges. But again, similar to Igneous Hammer, you have got to adhere to its playstyle. Play peak oriented, dip in and out of cover, always try to land that first shot as a crit, especially now that it requires 2 crits in one body. Again, previously, I didn't even care. I would just get like 1 crit whenever, because you could just 1 crit 2 body. But now, that first shot, you gotta make it a crit, because your aim is only gonna get worse as the gunfight goes on. Your enemy's moving, they're shooting you, you got flinch to encounter, so that first shot has got to be a clean crit. But overall, I think what Bottom Dollar and True Prophecy presents is the most extreme range cases. Outside of that though, Bottom Dollar does have a role that rivals the consistency of Igneous, and that is of course Surplus and Explosive Payload. Now granted, not everyone wants to rock Surplus, because every time you do burn an ability, it does drop your handling, reload, and stability, and that can throw you off. But depending on your subclass, take Revenant Hunters for instance, 6 Coyote users, you pretty much always have your abilities at all times, allowing you to take part in Surplus, which greatly buffs the abilities here. Now another hand cannon I wanted to look at is of course Steady Hand. I have collected so many rolls of Steady Hand. I've gone with this roll right here, which greatly buffs the stability. It also has Killing Wind. I got this roll with Snapshot, Killing Wind. I think it's safe to say that I am a huge Killing Wind fan on all 120s. I think they're pretty nice, but there's also a number of other good rolls on Steady Hand. You've got Moving Target, Snapshot, which is a great combination. You've got Slide Shot into Snapshot. And again, previously like Igneous, Quick Draw was my baby on this thing, right? Maxed out that handling speed, made this 120 feel essentially like a 140 or even a 150. For those that even remember what 150 round per minute hand cannons felt like. They felt good. They felt fluid. Quick Draw presented that. Snapshot kind of presents that. And I do recommend, similar to Igneous Hammer, having something like Snapshot. If you don't have Rangefinder or Payload perks to really buff that range, you're gonna have to bring some fluidity into these hand cannons to allow you to somewhat duel effectively against 140s. Snapshot will allow you to do that. Honestly, Steady Hand, man, it just feels like a more fluid version of True Prophecy to me with less range. And that's how it's always been. I've been wrecked by many Steady Hand users before, and I think it still wrecks. It's just similar to Igneous. You gotta spec it differently than what we were speccing it before. Now, I know some people love Iron Grip for that increase in stability, which that's fine, but you're losing Snapshot. And like I said, fluidity is so important in those dueling territories. So choose whatever you want there. If you want more stability, sure, but the weapon's gonna feel super sluggish. And if I'm gonna rock a super sluggish hand cannon that's a 120, I might as well rock the 120 with the furthest reach, either True Prophecy or Bottom Dollar. And no, Swashbuckler can't get the 2-tap. Unless, of course, you're rocking Swashbuckler ×5, which does hit 107 per crit. Honestly, I think ×3 and ×4 could possibly pull it off. But hell, fellas, we're talking ease of use here. Speaking of ease of use, though, let's talk about Sturm. Ah, yes. Our favorite exotic 120 for so many reasons. Has it been hurt? Yes. It actually sits somewhere around 37 meters in range, which is still very good. But something that Sturm possesses, though, is an exotic catalyst that greatly buffs its range to 91 and its handling to 73. Everything that I just talked about, some of these other hand cannons, you have to have Snapshot in order for the weapon to to feel fluid enough. Sturm possesses that. It already is fluid. Now, Sturm with Drain is a combination that did get heavily nerfed, and that's because just the overall damage multiplier in its crit was dropped. It used to do like 167, now it does like 144, which is still enough to get the 2-tap, but it still is a drop in damage, and you definitely can't get the 1-tap like we used to before. Of course, you had to stack a bunch of things to get a 1-tap, but no longer will you be able to do that. Sturm, though, by itself, like even if you didn't want to rock Drain, like I was still just rocking a shotgun with it, Sturm does feel really good. But one suggestion I have for Sturm users, rock the base default ornament. Dude, I said it a long time ago about Last Word, that the ornaments made the weapon feel funky. I just felt like the hit registration was wrong. And then it turned out we were right. And I think Bungie since fixed it, of course, because Eververse stuff gets fixed super fast. But the ornament was funky and was messing with Last Word. And that's why the base default skin for Last Word felt so much more consistent. I honestly think the same thing applies here with Sturm. So if you're rocking your Sturm, you're like, yo, I don't understand. This hand cannon just doesn't feel good. Fellas, take the ornament off, put on its base look, and I promise you, it's gonna feel good. And Sturm actually does feel really good, even outside of its range, where it does run into damage fall off that's just as steep as other hand cannons. I felt like Sturm, for some reason, was still landing shots. The only downside of Sturm is it is an exotic, so it burns your exotic slot, and you can't slot Icarus. One big benefit, though, to Sturm is actually its mag size. I can't tell you how many times I was shooting weapons like Bottom Dollar or Steady Hand with only 8 rounds in the magazine, and I suddenly found myself, especially now that the damage has been dropped, I found myself now running out of ammo. Maybe not in the first gunfight, but definitely in the second gunfight. So having 12 rounds in the magazine is extremely important, and I can't tell you how many times it actually saved me while using Sturm. Now, all of these hand cannons really do feel good. I know we didn't really talk about Loud Lullaby, but we just recently reviewed Loud Lullaby. If you want to check that review out, I do think that Loud Lullaby is the weaker of all the 120s, despite it looking absolutely sexy. I get it, guys. Loud Lullaby is a beautiful weapon, but unless beauty possesses some other power to help you in that gunfight, it don't really matter that it's got feathers. The main benefit to Loud Lullaby is, of course, it can rock Kill Clip, which can secure 2-taps, even on max resilience Guardians. As for the best 120 in the game, well, they all got a significant nerf in its range and its damage, but I do believe True Prophecy and Bottom Dollar with range boosting perks is still very, very good options in team play scenarios. And as far as 120s that have great dueling capabilities, Steady Hand is pretty good with Snapshot. The same with Igneous Hammer. You really want to have Snapshot there. And Bottom Dollar with Surplus. And arguably Bottom Dollar, because Bottom Dollar can do Surplus and a Payload perk. So the two main things I want you to take away from this, because I have no idea what the future presents, or even if we'll even get another 120 in the future. But if next season somehow brings us back Duke, every 120 that you get, I want you to hang on to your rangefinder rolls and payload perk rolls, time payload or explosive payload. Outside of that, 140s for the most part, even high range 140s sit at about 33 to 34 meters. It's only until you start really dabbling with Palindrome that you get up to 36 meters. So do I think this nerf is effective? Yes, absolutely. I think the damage drop is super noticeable. It changes up what needs to be the role you go for, and any 120 user is gonna have to be more disciplined when using these hand cannons. Outside of that, guys, it's an interesting meta. 140s are looking pretty good. Pulse rifles are also looking good. Messenger is looking amazing. And don't sleep on Vigilance Wingman. However, one more main weapon we're going to be breaking down tomorrow will be, of course, Dead Man's Tail. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.